Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is February 28th, 2025, and we got episode 323, and we're going to talk about Zelenskyy and Trump. They had a meeting today, and America's fascination with war. So I'm a little bit late because I don't know. I got stuck listening to a video by Rick Beto, and the title of his video was, "Is this Boston's greatest song?" So Boston is a rock group from the 70s in America. I think their first album was released in 76, and when I was a kid, it was my favorite band. It still probably is. And I just been re listening over and over the first album, and so I'm getting all of these Boston related videos, and it's hard for me not to not to watch them. But anyways, let's get down to business. First, I was watching a video from the Rebel Capitalist. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but Rebel Capitalist podcast, George Gammon, and the title of his video was "The Mainstream Media Just Switched Their Narrative on the Economy." And so now we're talking about inverted yield curves and economic trouble that's coming, et cetera. And so, of course, now that, we know that the media doesn't like Donald Trump. And so all of the negative news that existed prior to him getting elected is now being reported well, more accurately anyway than it was before, right? Before they were saying, oh, the economy is great. How do you go from a red hot, great economy to all of a sudden we got economic trouble on the horizon? And people don't question that. It's just so mind-boggling how simple and how brain dead so many people in the United States are. It's frustrating, really. It's maddening, especially all these people that I grew up with. Even just basic thinking is just non-existent with any of them. And I mentioned this early on in this channel that when I was younger, when we were in school together, I always looked up to these people as, wow, they're so smart, they're so wise about the world, because I wasn't allowed out of my room, right? As a Asian growing up in America in those days, the only thing you were allowed to do was study. And that's why so many Asians in those times wanted to get out of the house, go far, far away for college, right? It wasn't about the education, it was about getting away from home. Uh, so, I looked up to these people, and all of a sudden today I meet up with them and reconnect with them, and they're morons, right? I mean, they're just so, when I mean moron, it's so close-minded and narrow-minded and so subjective in everything that they say. It's kind of crazy. I am torn, however, with this bad news because Vince Lanci on Arcadia Economics, he has a take on Trump and the necessary how it is necessary for the dollar to be weakened. And so you had that, obscene budget passed, but it's necessary, right? In order to make America great again, you can't have a strong dollar. I tried to rewatch the video, but I can't seem to find it. But it has something to do with that. If you want to bring manufacturing back to the United States because of the weird, interesting, unique status of the reserve currency, you can't have it as strong because then it makes it impossible or very, very difficult to export goods, right? Because it's too expensive in other countries. Something along those lines, okay? And finance was not my major, but I get the gist of the argument that somehow there is some logic behind the madness, right? Um, but it's not surprising that the news would change like this. I mean, Trump really isn't perfect. I mean, there are a lot of things going on that upset me, but then I'm going to say something about that too in a little bit. But the reality of the world was much, much worse, or was just as bad even before he was elected. I mean, we were on the brink of World War III for crying out loud, right? And now at least Trump is trying to talk that down. And talking down World War III is upsetting people. It blows my mind, right? And I think I mentioned before, I one day I looked up and I said, since when did I become the hippie, right? Because a lot of the people I taught with, they were hippies, literally hippies in the 60s, right? Right. And so they were a lot older than me, but I mean, they see themselves as the cool kids, right? And here I am, straight-laced, you know, religious conservative, and now I'm the hippie, right? How does that even work? I should make an episode on that. Anyway, so Trump had a meeting with ZeNazi. I like to call him ZeNazi because he is a Nazi, right? He canceled elections. He's pumping this war. He's pushing this war. He's oppressing his people. It's just insane. And it is no secret, well, maybe it's a secret to everyone who still likes him, that the main military faction in the Ukraine, they're Nazis, right? They proudly wear the Nazi insignia, and I think they trace their history back to the racial purity mindset of the collaborators of the Ukrainians, right? The collaborating Ukrainians, people who collaborated with Germany in World War II to fight against the Nazis. I mean, you may remember that guy that was celebrated in Canada, right? They all gave him a standing ovation and he fought with the Nazis. I mean, they were literally giving standing ovations to, and Zelenskyy was there too, right? It was because he was there, they brought this guy out. Like, yeah, he's a veteran. He fought against the Russians. And I was like, wait a minute, the Nazis fought against the Russians and they were celebrating him. And no one really seemed to notice. That was kind of funny. I think ZeNazi understood and where it was kind of feeling a little awkward. Like, do you realize that this guy is a real Nazi, whereas Zelensky is a Nazi by necessity, right? The best soldiers in Ukraine are Nazis, right? They're all about the racial purity. That's why they were, bombarding and trying to get rid of all the Russian-speaking Ukrainians. So anyway, so he had a meeting with Trump today in the Oval Office. Right, they had a off-camera meeting prior to the on-camera meeting, and I don't think that went very well because it spilled over into the meeting in front of the cameras, and which weirded me out, right? Because just the other day, Trump is talking about American peacekeepers in the Ukraine, rare earth mineral deals being made with Ukraine. And then you also have the peace negotiations with Russia, Trump talking to Putin, and everything is going pretty well. And then you hear that munitions and money is flowing back to Ukraine again, and you're like, what is going on? There's so many mixed signals. And then you have an argument in the Oval Office in front of all the cameras. Now, it seems like depending on whose side you're on, who you like and who you support, who was rude and who was not rude. So me watching it, I thought it was interesting because in my head, Zelensky is there begging for money, which means that he has to bend over backwards and always defer to Trump. Like, oh, Trump, you're right. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. You're right. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what his attitude should be. He is not an equal by any stretch of the imagination. So for him not to be deferent, not to be humble and humiliated is by itself rude. And Trump could say anything he wants, right? Because he's in the United States president. That's where all the money and the weapons are coming from. So he can say anything he wants and it wouldn't be rude, right? Because it's Zelensky who's there begging for money, right? And so he's begging for money and he's talking over Trump. He's disagreeing with Trump. He's threatening Trump when he's saying, hey, you have this ocean here, but pretty soon you're going to feel the pain. And it's like, huh? That's how you ask for money? And so my take on it is maybe because I'm Asian, you should be totally silent If Trump says jump, you say how high, right? As you're jumping. And so, but apparently a lot of people that I listened to, even Judge Napolitano, he says that Trump was the one that was rude, maybe because ZeNazi was the guest. I don't know. But a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, that I went to school with over the years are liberals or Democrats or at least anti-Trumpers. And so anything, Trump could hug a baby and people would just have a cow, right? So they're all melting down. And I realize that they're all pro-war Americans. And a lot of them are supposedly Christians. And it just boggles my mind how you can be a Christian and so be so openly pro-war. Like, is that what Jesus would do, right? Say, yeah, let's go kill some more people. I don't know. It's such a, at the very least, you should stay neutral. Like, I don't like Trump, but I can't really talk about it, right? Whereas for me, it's like pretty clear. Anything that moves in the direction of peace, yeah, let's do that, right? Especially when you understand the history of it, or how engaging in war is completely useless. I mean, look at Vietnam. We had to lose all those lives, all that suffering, all the people, and the number of people who died because of the carpet bombing that America carried out there. I mean, the number of Asians that were killed, it's in the millions, right? And so this kind of situation is how can it's not a very Christian attitude, right? The more you think about it, it can't be. You can cover it up with all the righteousness, self-righteous virtue signaling that you want. It doesn't change the fact that a lot of people are dying. And if you ask them, I don't think they would want to be dead, right? And I don't have a say on it either. Like, oh no, but you made the right choice by being dead. Are you kidding me? No way. I don't believe that for a second. And so I'm shocked. I'm disappointed that so many Americans who claim to believe in the Prince of Peace, I might sound like a little bit like Gerald Celente, but uh, people who claim to be Christians, all about love and the golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself, is like bloody murder when it comes to certain things. It's just really, it's bothersome. I don't know. But then, whatever. I'm just going to fight them with memes. But Larry Johnson, he was on Judge Napolitano's podcast, and basically he said that it was a kind of a setup. That ZeNazi, by arguing with Trump in the Oval Office while he's there begging for money, gave Trump the reason to get rid of him, saying, "Look, see, look at him. This guy is not qualified to be the president of Ukraine." And I think he says that at the end, right after they are going back and forth. Trump basically pulls back and says, "American public needs to see this, right?" Uh, and so make a deal or get out. And basically, this is the end of ZeNazi. And that's according to Ray McGovern, who is on the Intelligence Roundtable of Judge Napolitano's podcast, Judging Freedom. So I'm sure that ZeNazi was surprised by the complete change in the attitudes, right? Like the last time he was here, right? They were, all everyone in this a lot of people wanted to meet with him. He was in Pennsylvania signing bombs with the governor, right? Governor Shapiro, uh, to go from the red carpet to being asked to leave the White House early, right? The Oval Office early. It must have been very, very confusing for that guy. Um, and uh, Larry Johnson added that the Europeans are shocked, right? They're absolutely shocked. They're like, oh, here comes Macron first, then Keir Starmer, uh, and then comes Zelensky, right? So the 1, 2, 3 punch to get convince Trump to come back into the war. And I think my wife was telling me that Trump insulted Macron by not greeting him as he came out of the car. He insulted Keir Starmer by basically interrupting him and saying, "You could have taken Russia by yourselves." And then today, at the conclusion of their, spat, we'll call it, Trump said, "This makes great TV," and so entertainment for whom? And Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern offer that the audience, the true audience of what was happening, is Russia. So Russia is following this closely. Russia says they're not going to uh, negotiate with Zelensky, so you got to get rid of Zelensky, right? And Trump said, "Okay, I'll get rid of him somehow," but not by assassination, but directly, but by showing everyone, yeah, he's not fit to govern, right? I mean, he suspended elections primarily because he knew he was going to lose. I mean, how is he going to get votes from people uh, whose children he stole to die at the front? It's just they're not going to he's not going to get their votes, right? At the very least, it's going to be close, right? And so he did this, and Ray McGovern basically said that uh, Trump would have been given information. These are the buttons you push, and then he'll freak out. He'll have a meltdown, and then you'll have the news video that you need to show Russia that, yeah, you are working on getting rid of him. And Trump said it multiple times. I want peace. I want the killing to stop. It's not just Ukrainians, but Russians as well. And anyone who cares for human life should look at listen to what Trump is saying and saying, oh, okay, yeah, let's preserve life. It's sort of like the climate change thing, right? Where they're like, save the planet. I don't care. The planet will always be. It's like what George Carlin will always say. The planet is going to be here, whether we're here or not. And but rather you want to take the policy which saves more people, not puts them into greater hardship. And so Trump is sitting there saying, look, we can have a ceasefire right now, and you said you don't want it. So there's nothing more to say. Right. And so the first thing when I heard that it was a performance for Russia, then it means that how are you going to get another leader? Well, you need to have elections in the Ukraine. And so MP Alexander Dubinsky demands impeachment of Zelensky, right? That tweet came up right after this meeting with Trump. And so even that, right, needed a trigger. It needed an event for anti-Zelensky people to be able to step up and say, yes, we need to impeach him. He's right. And so basically, this was very, very bad for Zelensky. And I think it was Larry Johnson. He said that someone who was in the room, right, saw Zelensky's staff who was off camera, and one of them, who may have been chief of staff, just put her face in her hands, which were on her lap, like, this is bad. So then you might ask, who's really winning in the Ukraine? And if you listen to people like Colonel McGregor, right, uh, the Ukrainians are losing big time. And just on paper, you could just even figure it out yourself, right? Uh, Ukraine had 300,000 people at the beginning of the war, and now they're kidnapping people off the street to try to fill their ranks, right? So those 300,000 are dead, and they probably went through another 300,000. And it is said that there are close to 100,000 dead, right? Which is insane. It's absolutely insane. And how can anyone sit here and say, yeah, let's keep going? I mean, there won't be any Ukrainians left, right? And so it's what Ron Paul said at the very, very beginning, as soon as the first missiles started to fly, Ron Paul said, are we going to fight this war to the last Ukrainian? And apparently, all these people who claim to know God, who claim to know Jesus, who claim to be all about love and peace, who celebrate Christmas, yeah, they want more war. It's just absolutely disgusting to me. I'm worse, right? I've toned it down for this podcast, but anyway. So who's really winning? It doesn't seem like the Ukrainians are winning. Otherwise, why would they be over here begging for money? So what's the strategy for peace? Maybe Trump is using his ability to upset people, to distract people, to create diversions from the actual plan. And I've talked about this before with the whole Sun Tzu and uh, in the White House kind of thing. And I think it's a mistake to underestimate Trump. My wife and I were just going through all these different, if Trump really is playing 4D chess, then what's he really up to? Who knows? Right? So one day he's saying, yeah, American troops will be peacekeepers in Ukraine. And the next day he's fighting with Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. It's just really interesting. And the fact that so many people in Europe wants NATO to enter this war, it's just kind of crazy where the US is like, nah, we're not going to do this. Wouldn't it be interesting? I think I mentioned this in passing before. Wouldn't it be interesting if the US ends up becoming more aligned with Russia and China, right? Keep in mind, right? The whole Russia collusion thing was a hoax. It was all made up. And, Putin was probably a very vicious person, but Russia might have needed that. And so, wouldn't it be interesting if the United States became more aligned with Russia and China instead of Europe? Right? That the sane people in the room would be, right, SANE, the sane, not crazy people in the room are Russia and China, right? And what if these great military powers, instead of spending, it's Trump logic, right? Instead of spending so much money on military, what if we just spent it on making our countries better? I mean, he says these things and people are like, oh, but it's Trump. We have to hate him. And start killing more people. It's just weird, right? Is it that their hatred of Trump is the only thing that matters in their lives? It's very odd to me. And the path that America was on was war with these two countries, and the path that America is on now is, you know, towards peace. I've said this before, and I just want to reemphasize it as in closing this episode, and which happens to be the last episode of this week, and it's going to end on an up note. But Trump wants to be remembered, his legacy as the peace president. I mean, he said that. I've heard him. I don't think he's changed his mind. It's not like I listened to all his speeches, but I heard him say that. And the whole idea of him getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and a lot of his supporters saying, yeah, put him on Mount Rushmore, that is what he wants. And so I'm wondering, if that really is his hope, he can't be pushing for a Middle Eastern war. And there was that thing that he shared, right? A golden statue of himself in Gaza. That can't be, right? He has to know, right? Right. Like if he's playing 4D chess right now in Ukraine, he has to know that that is not going to be the path for peace. Like, is he playing everyone, especially is he playing, you know, that country over there in the Middle East that's not like all the others, but their grip on the United States is so strong. Like, what if all the money that was laundered through the Democratic, right, all the money that was going overseas, particularly to Ukraine, came back and a lot of it found its way to the Jewish lobby, and that money is being used to fund all of the elections and influence all the elections here in the United States? Wouldn't that be kind of crazy? Obviously, it's a conspiracy theory, but wouldn't that be interesting? Right. And so this is the way that Trump would be able to come out from that particular corruption. I don't know. I'm hoping. I'm still grabbing on straws because none of this makes any sense at all. And just by seeing how everyone is losing their poop, right? I mean, they're even people who voted for him and are pulling for him just get so upset over some of the things that he says, right? So is it that he's really good at deception, throwing everyone off the scent so he can get what he needs to get done? I don't know. I'm hoping, but the court is still out, obviously, because we have the crisis that's coming. And it looks like he's making moves to try to avoid it or mitigate it, reduce its negative effect on us. Who knows? But that's it for this week. I will talk to you next time.